Good morning. This is Ed Condon. I'm the Executive Director with the Region 9 Head Start Association. We're so pleased that you have joined us today for our first of three vaccine education webinars. My producer today is Fernando Alvarenga, and you can send him questions in the chat box or also place items in the Q&A on any questions that relate to Zoom. He can be of assistance to you there. We will be sending out after this presentation today a recording, access to the recording, as well as the slides from the presentation. So you'll receive those as well from us, and a certificate of participation will be included. So look for those in the next 48 hours from the Region 9 Head Start Association. We're pleased to see folks here from, of course, in Region 9, California, Arizona. I see folks from Nevada and Hawaii, also from our friends in Michigan, Tennessee. I see West Virginia, as well as Colorado. So we're glad to see a national audience, and we know this issue is of critical concern broadly to Head Start, and in particular to the agencies that have taken time to join. We'll be getting started in just a moment. I do encourage you, as I see folks letting us know where you're from, the agency and the city. So that's always great to see the various folks who will turn out. As I say, this is the first of three planned webinars for Region 9 on the topic of vaccine education. Our second webinar is scheduled February 24th, my apology, February 24th at 1 p.m. And we'll have Drs. Mrna and Peter Zelansky of the UCLA Mattel Children's Hospital. And they are very active in the Los Angeles community, as well as with the American Academy of Pediatrics. Dr. Mrna is the incoming AAP president in 2022. And then on March 31st, at 1 p.m. we'll be featuring Head Start agency leaders to outline some of the efforts that they're making in their local communities around vaccine education, both with staff as well as with parents. Before we hear from our presenters, I would like to welcome and introduce my partner, my collaborative partner from the Michigan Head Start Association, Robin Bozick. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you, Ed. I'm really pleased to have collaborated with Ed and the Region 9 Head Start Association for this webinar today. It's really been a wonderful opportunity for all of us to continue to learn about the vaccines, and especially in such a fluid environment where we see the virus is continuing to change. So thank you.
Wonderful, and thank you. And it's great to see a great turnout from Michigan grantees and around the country. So today we're going to hear from three critical voices. I was sharing as we were getting ready for this webinar that when the opportunity arose for us to do this work, there were three people who I felt most trusted and most insightful in this area. Dr. Dipesh Navsaria, Julie Kurtz, and Damon Carson. And when I reached to them each in December, they immediately said, yes, let's work out the details. So first, let me offer my heartfelt thanks for your willingness to extend your time, your wisdom, and your passion for the field of early childhood education as we really strive to elevate practices and serve the children and families who are most at risk of academic struggles and are most challenged in local communities. So thank you for the gift of your time and your wisdom. So today we'll hear, as I say, from Dr. Dipesh Navsaria, Associate Professor of Pediatrics at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. And he'll be reviewing with us the vaccine science and education and really updating us on where we're headed within the COVID-19 era around vaccines. Second, speaking really about our emotional responses to processing trust and trust building is Julie Kurtz. And Julie Kurtz is the founder of the Center for Optimal Brain Integration and a frequent presenter and confidant for the Region 9 Association, guiding agencies, in particular in the area of trauma-informed responses, trauma-informed care. And then third, Damon Carson, who will share a bit of his personal journey, both as a family man as well as an agency leader. He's the general manager of Neighborhood House Association in San Diego. He's also the chairman of the National Head Start Association and a board member for Region 9, and again, a trusted friend in helping to move this community forward. So let's begin. Let's hear from Dr. Navsaria to start with. Doctor?
Good day. Hi, everyone. It's a delight to be here. I'm just going to take a moment here to get my screen shared appropriately. So delight to come to you from snowy Madison, Wisconsin, which is far away for some of you and not so far away for many of you. Also, I just have to say, I was pleased to see so many people who were logging on from Starfish. Hi, Anne. I think you're out there somewhere. Haven't had a chance to chat in a long time, but always great to see a valued friend appear on these things here. So my job in just a short period of time is to really just talk about some elements of about how I've been thinking about COVID-19 vaccines. And I'm going to deliberately steer clear of talking about some of the aspects of it that are more in emotion and trust and all, because we have a wonderful presenters talking about that right after me. So I want to focus a little bit more on process. And again, I'm going to just keep things relatively short here because I want to make sure that I'm able to really get through the big points here. There's a lot of details and there'll be a lot of time in the Q&A as well to try to address some of these things. Now, again, everything in this presentation changes quickly because that's the world we're in. So I don't think the basic concepts or principles will change a whole lot, but please make sure you have up-to-date information from reliable sources because things can change in as little as a few weeks in terms of new information or data. Again, I don't think there'll be huge shifts in the basic ideas. So let's talk for a few moments about the process of how we actually even figure out medications like vaccines. So the first thing that happens is that they go out there and they figure out like what's a possible new drug, vaccine, whatever that's out there. And then they say, does it work? They go into the process of clinical trials. If those go well and it's proven to be effective and actually works, then you get approval, right? That the FDA in the US says, okay, this works, you should go ahead and do it. Once that approval comes through, you get manufacturing, and then you get distribution, okay, and it gets out there to everyone. So this is the usual process, okay, that's gone through just in a really brief summary form. Now, trials, there's all this talk about phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. I like to think of it as what questions are they actually trying to answer in each of these, okay? So first of all, preclinically, how does this even work? Does this thing even biologically, is it plausible? Is it actually going to make a difference? This is part of what we always need to ask instead of just somebody claiming that it's going to make a difference. Phase 1 asks, is it safe? Is giving this to living creatures of any kind safe? Is it going to be okay? That's usually animal studies, etc. Phase 2 is where they bring in humans and they say, what's the right dose? Okay, we've shown that it's likely safe. We're going to keep looking for safety, but what's the right dose that we need in order to make this work? And then phase 3, which are the largest of the studies before it's being done, then they ask, how effective is this? How much of a difference does it actually make? And then you get approval licensure, which says, is this actually right for widespread use? Okay, not in hundreds of people or thousands of people, but in potentially millions of people. And then there's what we call phase 4. Does it remain safe? If you have something that's a 1 in 100 million side effect, you're not going to test 100 million people. That's a third of the country easily, right? They keep watching, keep monitoring, doing all these things. It's actually a remarkably safe process, safer than, by the way, most other consumer products, including cosmetics, skincare lotions, many plastics, etc., and so on and so forth. So when I hear people say things like, I will not be a guinea pig, well, that's actually people who often don't understand the research process. Because honestly, if we just released a medicine and waited to see what would happen, that would be an absolutely terrible scientific study design. I mean, I know no statistician who would want to go within 10 feet of that, just even from an analysis perspective. I'm obviously from an ethical perspective as well, and so on. There's a lot of trials, a lot of careful work that's done. And I will tell you that the research process is very painstaking. So I myself was actually a participant, or am actually a participant in one of the vaccine trials. This is the Oxford Astrazeneca vaccine. They do that. They had a site of that trial here in Madison, and I signed up for it as soon as it was available because of all the things I'm sharing with you today. I looked into the process. So I have been a vaccine trial participant, got my first injection back in September, second injection in November, and so on and so forth. So I was ready to try to be part of this even before there was an approval because of how much confidence I personally had in the process that's there. And I even have my, my informed consent sheet. This is the actual packet that they went through with me in great detail for like 2 hours. It was actually getting a little much in my opinion. It reminded me that it was completely voluntary, went through all the risks, all the benefits, reminded me again it was voluntary, et cetera, et cetera. I've done little bits of research, mostly surveys, nothing with medications, as a researcher myself, but this is the first time I was on the other side of the fence there. And it was very illuminating in many ways, and I felt very safe in the entire process, and that things were being done in a very painstaking way, just watching all the elements of it. So a little history real quickly. Vaccine technology, there's all the vaccines we currently have. They come in various types. I'm not going to sit here and dwell on it, but what I'm going to tell you is this is kind of mostly how they're produced. You put the offending organism in a blender, and then you take out the parts and you see which ones will create immunity. It's obviously way more sophisticated than that, but that's kind of what we've been doing for decades. And we've kind of run out of options, right? It doesn't work for many things that we're trying to deal with right now. So, and then there's some live virus vaccines in a couple of places where we create these wimpy sort of vaccines, wimpy sort of viruses that don't cause the disease but still produce immunity. This is like measles, the nasal flu vaccine, so on. And remember that the coronaviruses have been around for a long time. It didn't just all appear this year. I guarantee you, we've all been ill from a regular seasonal coronavirus at some point in our lives more than once. It's a cause of the common cold and so on. So you get seasonal, you get the SARS virus, which mostly swept through Asia several years ago, the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome virus, right? Coronavirus is not brand new. We've known a lot about different types of coronaviruses for many, many years. So this didn't just fall out of the sky from Mars or something. And then there's the one we're dealing with now, which officially is called SARS-CoV-2, just if you see that. So this is where new vaccine technologies have come in. These are much, much more targeted, much more tailored, these mRNA and adenovirus vectors, right? So this is actually exciting for us because vaccine development has kind of been stalled. The old stuff doesn't work on a lot of new diseases that we'd like to have vaccines for. So what you're seeing now with these mRNA vaccines, guess what? They didn't rush this out the door in 2 months. They've been working on these technologies for well over 10, 15 years. So a lot of them were already available on the shelf. The Oxford one, actually, they created specifically to say, we'd like to create a vaccine that could work against most diseases and that we can drop in the right genetic code and really do this very tailored approach. They developed that a long time ago. So again, when people say to you, this was rushed out the door, it's too new, it's like, well, not really. Okay, so I think we need to really think about that in different ways. All right, so keep in mind that this virus was identified in late 2019. The genome was sequenced incredibly rapidly, right? It literally was days. And they figured out how to do testing a day later, really a day later, and vaccine work started very quickly. So we're sitting here about a year out from when specific to this disease vaccine work started. Okay, this didn't just start in October or something like that. I think the first humans were given the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine in late April. Okay, so we've got some months of experience with at least small numbers of those initial volunteers. Okay, and those are all volunteers, major ethical kind of safeguards there. So by April, 80 companies, right? Lots of different people working on this, lots of dollars, lots of resources. So if we come back to that thing I showed you earlier about how we do this, this is the part I need you to understand, because this is what a lot of people don't get, and I don't think is being told well in the media. It's not that it's not being told, it's just not being told well, in my opinion. So if you think this is the usual timeline, this takes a long time. This takes 2-3 years in general, minimum. So here's what's happening. What they did was they said, hey, usually we wait for approval, then we go manufacture. That alone takes 18 months, because if we're not going to get approved, we're not manufacturing all this stuff, right? That's expensive, takes a lot of effort, a lot of work. So here's what they did with the coronavirus vaccines. They started manufacturing at the same time as trialing it. Okay, so the vaccine that I got in the trial was already being produced and set aside. If it works, if it gets approved, great, we have vaccine ready to go. Okay, so again, yay, approval came through, fine, start distributing this stuff immediately. That's why we already had Pfizer vaccine going out the door within 2 weeks, Moderna vaccine going out the door within 2 weeks. It was there, let's start moving it out there. Okay, what if it didn't get approved? There's a few of them out there. I think I just heard one of the Merck vaccines, they're giving up on. They're like, yeah, this isn't working. You know, the trials don't look so great. They're like, forget it, never mind. Oh no, sad face. They didn't get approval. What happens to any vaccine they might have set aside? That does not get distributed and instead gets thrown in the trash. It's a big financial risk, but hey, we're in the middle of a freaking pandemic, right? We got to do something. Okay, this alone took months upon months off of the schedule. The other thing is, hey, bureaucracy. Federal agencies are great at bureaucracy. It's what they do. They took a lot of the bureaucracy out of it. Instead of waiting, the FDA is like, give us the info right now. Let's start looking at it. We're not going to have it sit there for 2-3 months. This great headline from the Onion, the satirical newspaper: FDA delays emergency vaccine approval until they finish evaluating new bagged salad kit, right? They're not sitting there saying, oh, we're going to get to this later. They're saying, we need this now. We're going to start all of our reviews now and go through it and prioritize it because of how significant an impact this is. So you cut out bureaucracy, you cut out some of the manufacturing stuff, you do not cut out the safety elements. And all of a sudden, you're getting much, much closer, much, much faster than than before, without doing this in a dangerous manner. Okay, I think that's really important to recognize. You want to know what one of AstraZeneca's biggest worries was? I heard this wonderful interview on the BBC about this. They were worried that there weren't enough glass vials. Of course, they were worried about safety and all those sorts of things, but this became rapidly evident that it was safe, it was reasonably effective, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, our worry is that there's not enough glass vials in the world for us to be able to manufacture enough vaccine. Yeah, really, that turned into the biggest part of concern. The manufacturers cut deals with one another to share resources, et cetera. Really unprecedented cooperation. So there's a few out there. In the US, Pfizer and Moderna are the two that have been authorized for use. And those are already, you know, in those early phases of distribution. We'll see if the Astrazeneca gets approved here. It's been approved in the UK and in the European Union. And then there's Russian, Chinese, there's a Sanofi one that's out there. The CSL Australian one was a great example of one that seemed effective, and then they gave up on it because the immunity it was producing was confusing HIV tests. They didn't have HIV. It was just causing a false positive on HIV tests, and that's terrible. So they said, never mind, we're not going to go there because there's other vaccines out there, and so on and so forth. There's also the question of what does effective actually mean? All of these studies are looking at preventing severe disease. Okay, so first of all, when they say 90% effective, it doesn't mean 90% strength. It just means that if you take 1,000 people, 900 of them are likely to develop meaningful immunity. What does meaningful immunity mean? Well, it could mean things. they're looking at, will it actually keep you from getting severely ill, right? If we can do that alone, yay, right? That's a big deal right there. But ideally, if you can not get sick at all, that's even better. We don't know what that's going to play out like. Let's see, right? Again, the studies weren't looking for that. We'll see over time. Will this keep you from getting sick, even if you still get infected? Or the best is, of course, will it prevent spread? Could I, in theory, get the virus and not have any symptoms, but still spread it to others? Well, that's no good, right? In terms of preventing spread. So we'd like to know that as well. What we do know is that it's reducing severe disease dramatically, 90, 94, 95%, better than we ever could have hoped. We would have taken a 60% effective vaccine like only a few months ago, and now we have two candidates, two vaccines that are quite effective. So this is really a great thing. And now what we have essentially is an implementation problem, right? How do we get it out? How do we manufacture it? How do we get it to everyone that's necessary? And so on. All right. So everyone wants to know, what about X group, right? There's all sorts of special circumstances, et cetera. We don't always have the data on that yet. And again, it's all weighing the risks and the benefits. In general, these are extraordinarily safe. Vaccines are actually some of the safest medications we have. One of the things the anti-vaccine movement has been very successful in is making people think that it is a terrible thing to get a vaccine, that it is somehow fraught with risk and danger. You want to know what one of the major risks of getting immunized is? It's getting in your car to drive to go get it. Okay, you're more likely to get injured in an accident going to there than you are from the vaccine. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but if you look at the numbers, and again, this is about perception, not about the numbers, and we'll be talking about that later, but your greatest risk is actually getting in a car. Yet we drive cars all the time, right? We don't think about that risk. On the balance of things, again, if you're not sure, talk to your healthcare provider, but on the balance of things, vaccines are safe, vaccines save lives, and this has been done very safely. I talked about my experience as a participant. That is me getting the Pfizer vaccine, which I got secondarily. Long story, I won't go into all the reasoning about that, but I've had two different COVID vaccines. That is the needle in my arm at that moment as I was taking this selfie. It's great. If you take a selfie, you barely feel the needle. Pro tip. Proud to get it, happy to get it, and cannot wait for it to be available to everyone who would like to be immunized, which I hope is the vast majority of people. All right, this will be in the slides that you will receive later. There's the basic fact sheets, there's the CDC's page, ACIP. New York Times actually has a great thing on all the 8 million different types of vaccines. If you really want to nerd out on that, sure. All sorts of resources that are there. I also write a column in our local newspaper and have written about being in a vaccine trial, about other things that are in there, and about pandemics and so on. And finally, I'm in Wisconsin. I will give you the obligatory Wisconsin cheese-based messaging slide. Just because we're immunized does not mean we can go run around and do whatever. I think of it as one more layer of personal protective equipment. Okay, I am still wearing all the same equipment that I was before I got immunized in the in clinic, and I'm still wearing a mask indoors in my county. You know, distancing, all that sort of stuff, because it is one of these layers. And if for some reason that layer fails, there's a whole bunch of other layers that make a difference. And this is the best way to think about it, is both these personal and shared responsibilities that help keep us safe from spread. And I think that really makes a big difference. All right, there'll be time for questions later. I see some other things floating by here. My Facebook, public-facing Facebook and Twitter pages, and my email if you don't get a chance to get your question answered. And I promised my colleagues that I would try to post a bow tie selfie later on either of those sites of my tie today, which is the first time I'm wearing this one, which is actually has a vaccine pattern on it. You're not going to be able to see it well, but I'll try to get a photo up of that. So with that, I will turn it back over to our hosts, and happy to take your questions later in that section. Thank you.
I think I'll share my screen, right, Ed and Fernando? I'm going to share my screen right now, and I'll get started. Dr. Navsaria, I really appreciate especially you saying the importance of relying on reliable resources. So my name is Julie Kurtz, and I am, is this the right share, Fernando? And yeah, my name is Julie Kurtz. I am the CEO and the founder of the Center for Optimal Brain Integration. In fact, also the co-author of 2 books published right now. One is Trauma-Informed Practices for Early Childhood Educators and Culturally Responsive Self-Care for Early Childhood Educators. So we're going to bring in some of that neuroscience around making emotional decisions, the science behind the brain. Let's look at our brain right now, and let's examine the emotional aspects of what happens to us when we're faced with uncertainty, too much stress, too many big emotions. First of all, let me start off by saying that in the United States alone, 67% of us, 67% of the 750 people on this call have experienced at least one trauma before they turned 18. If you're working with kids under the age of 6, it's 50% in the United States. So that means that this is a matter of survival for us to really understand the aspects that happen to us when we've experienced trauma in the past in this decision making, and if we haven't experienced any trauma at all, what happens inside of our brain. So let's take a tour of your brain. In between your mouth and the base of your neck, if you can see me, is the red section of your brain. The science term is hindbrain. We're going to call it the part of our brain we share with all reptiles on the planet. This part of our brain is the most primitive. It's been around longer than any part of our brain, but it is designed for one big thing. It is designed to trigger one of the F words when we are in danger. Now, can you guess what one of the F words is? Clearly, I'll give you a clue. It's not a swear word or I'll be kicked off of the webinar. It is fight, flight, or freeze when we're faced with earthquakes, tsunamis, tornadoes, real danger. It also goes off this part of our brain when we're faced with perceived danger like uncertainty, too much stress, too many decisions, too many big emotions. And what happens to us is our heart rate starts increasing, our blood pressure increasing, our breathing becomes rapid and we chest breathe instead of belly breathe. Our body temperature raises, our pupils dilate, and the sensations in our body become mobilized to fight, flight, or freeze to protect ourselves from real or perceived danger. Now, cast the spotlight of your eyeballs on the left part of the brain, that little black hole that exists inside the limbic brain. It's a built-in smoke detector. It's a built-in alarm. We all have it. It's free. It doesn't even need battery replacements. It's kind of like if you look out into the field and you see a bunch of ground squirrels running around foraging for food outside of their really complex homes underneath the holes in the ground. And one of the ground squirrels is responsible for scanning for danger. And when they see a dog running free off of a leash through the field, they make a loud screech-like alarm sound. Get in the hole, get in the hole, danger, danger. All the squirrels run into the hole. Your brain does the same thing. This is actually the scanner constantly scanning, am I safe or I'm in danger? And when it goes off, it sends smoke signals to wake your hibernating reptile brain up to fight, flight, or freeze. Now let's walk up this staircase. In between your mouth and your eyeballs is the blue part of the brain. Science term is limbic brain. For the purposes of today, we're going to say we share this with all mammals on the planet. Dolphins, dogs, elephants, for example. It's responsible for 2 things, emotions. And you know our emotions can be calm, small emotions like a mouse, medium like a cat, or gigantic like a lion is how I would say it with kids in the early childhood field. But when our emotions rise up to the lion level or the red zone or really big from too much uncertainty and stress, guess what happens? The alarm goes off. The amygdala is the science term inside of our brain, waking up the reptile brain to fight, flight, or freeze to protect ourselves from real or perceived danger. And by the way, this part of our brain is also responsible for attachment. So when we're thinking of the vaccine, a lot of times we say to ourselves, This part of the brain is having a lot of emotional triggers as we're not sure when we watch the news what's real and what's not. So our emotions rise up. However, one of the things that can protect us is what Dr. Navsaria said, which is trusted, reliable science research. We'll talk about that in a minute when we make decisions. But people we trust, people that look like us, that will tell us it's okay. Like my brother, who's an educator in Texas, and my mom, who lives in Los Angeles, both got the vaccine. And now I'm like, okay, they're doing great. I'm going to get it after listening to Dr. Navsaria, because I trust trusted experts. So this part of the brain is designed for relational connection and emotions. Now, mammal and reptile makes up what we call the downstairs brain. They dance together to hijack us. It is not capable of thinking logically and having reason, but let's walk up the staircase to the top of the brain, above your eyeballs to the top of your head. Science term, cortex, prefrontal cortex, forebrain. I like to call it the executive brain, the boss, the CEO, or the air traffic control system. Today we'll call it the CEO. It's responsible for reasoning, logical reasoning, looking through all the facts, making a decision that's not just for my good, but for the greater good, perspective taking, problem solving, using logical reasoning and sustained focal attention, like when you get that IKEA table with 400 parts and 3,000 pages of instructions. You need your CEO to get through that and focus. Now, it takes 25 years to build your CEO, so that you don't get hijacked by your reptile brain. The CEO is responsible for when you get that news report that says, oh, the news is designed to make money. It's designed to trigger your alarm in your brain, wake up your reptile brain, because the more fear you have, the more you'll watch the news. So we have to be really careful to the media and the reliable news sources that we listen to, using our logic brain, not our emotional brain. Because when we listen to a story of one person who said something, our emotions rise up, our alarm goes off, and we as humans either freeze and shut down and say, forget it, I'm not getting it. Or we start fighting and get irritable and depressed. Or we run away and hide, and we can't make decisions unless we're able to access the thinking part of our brain that allows us to reason. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do you make sure that you have integrated brain decisions and not one part is hijacking you and taking over? Because a healthy human being is one that can have all parts talk to one another. Wow, I'm terrified right now. I have really big emotions, but I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to try to use some logical reasoning. I'm going to use people that ground me in times of stress. I'm going to go to people that I trust. And I'm going to solve this problem in a way that can use my CEO, because that's where I make decisions that don't hurt others, myself, or property. Healthy decision involves all parts of the brain, talking to one another, not one part. And if you're like me, someone who's experienced trauma growing up as a child, this is a scary time. It's triggering many of our past traumas. And when we experienced trauma, we felt a complete, utter loss of control as a child because we could not implement our fight, flight, freeze to protect ourselves because we were too little. So this time globally that we're living in is triggering a lot of our trauma memories into feelings of being out of control and having uncertainty, which is sending us globally into our reptile part of our primitive brain. A visual of this part of the brain. Let's look at this. I did take this picture of a sunset and I turned it into a slide. As you walk around the world unconsciously, your reptile brain is always looking around, scanning, am I safe? Most of us are living in our reptile brain right now, not feeling safe, right? So we're being hijacked by the fight, flight, freeze. The mammal is walking around the world, do I belong? And how am I feeling? And the CEO is always asking, how can I solve this problem for the greater good? And a lot of times what you need to remember is the CEO flips off in stress. How do we re-engage our CEO and our thinking brain when we are stressed so that we can access that part that actually really saves our lives and others? When we're hijacked by the downstairs part of our brain, we can't reason or use logic. We don't pay attention to facts. We make emotionally reactive decisions. We lose empathy. I don't care about anyone else or how good it is for anyone else. I only care about my own survival right now. Our focus becomes so narrow and self-absorbed. We're more apt to make decisions that will hurt others, ourselves, or property. We limit our problem-solving skills and we reduce our ability to look at all sides of a problem. So how do we do this? What strategies can I use? Well, thinking about self-care is not necessarily a privilege because it can involve the simple things that we do every day to buffer our toxic stress, because when our emotional stress is so heightened, for example, when I'm driving on the freeway and I have no emotional reserves yet left. I have so much stress that my emotional gas tank is empty and I'm living in my downstairs, even my reptile brain. Someone cuts me off on the freeway, I will chase them down, maybe hang out of the car, flip them off. I flip my lid and I'm not myself anymore because I've lost my thinking brain. But when my emotional gas tank is filled because I'm balancing the amount of stress I have with enough restoration and self-care, then because I've intentionally balanced it with that, I have more access to the neurosynaptic connectors going up to my thinking brain so I can make integrated decisions. So what are some ways we can take care of ourselves so that we can make decisions that are for the greater good? Well, recognizing how we feel is one. Not making it go away, just noticing. And then use being your own emergency first responder, because in school, we teach kids earthquake drills and fire drills. We never teach them emotional emergency drills. What do I do when I have an emotional emergency? Some of the things we have to do is when we're calm, intentionally think of where the people that I go to that ground me. The places I go, different before COVID than during COVID, or the environments. Or the activities. Some people say they get in their car and they blast the music and scream at the top of their lungs. Some early childhood educators have told me they get in the shower because it's the only place their kids who they're with all darn day won't bother them because they don't want to come in, when they're in the middle of the shower. Cleaning. My husband, he picks weeds out in the yard. That grounds him. For me, I make a checklist and I start checking things off the list. And it doesn't matter what's happening around me. If I can just check things off my list, I feel grounded. They're not what you think. And then activities, the very primitive part of the brain when we're scared. I'm going to give you one last, I'm looking at the time too, because I really want to hear Damon. I want to share one thing with you. When we're living in our reptile brain, which most of us are, there's very primitive strategies that we need to use for ourselves to ground ourselves. And I'll tell you what they are. If I gave you, my kids are 26 and 27, but if I had a baby right now, and I said, oh, 750 of you, can you please hold my baby? Because I need to go take an emergency Zoom call. And you're like, sure, but I walk out of the room and my baby just starts screaming and crying. And you have to comfort it. Now, even though I can't engage with you excessively through the chat, I'm going to guess from my past trainings what many of you say you'll do to comfort that infant. You're going to hum. You're going to rock the baby. You're going to use a voice tone that will calm the baby, right? When we hold babies, we're like, it's okay, Mamacita, I love you so much. I know you're scared. We change our voice tone and our facial expressions because the primitive parts of our brain are designed to be comforted in the same way we did when we comfort infants. Rocking, walking, movement, humming, music, dancing, singing, prayer, repetitive activities, and being around people, because we absorb it's called mirror neurons. We absorb the energy of other people, surrounding ourselves with images and people and places that can calm our stress response system. So, as a gift to you, I've got these bracelets. And I give these out when I do in-person trainings before COVID, and I'm going to give 5 of them away. And I'll tell you how in just a moment. But these bracelets represent 3 parts of the brain. And I've found that when we're dysregulated and we have a grounder on us that can keep us safe, one of the things that this bracelet does is the red section, when you hold it, can say, am I in my reptile brain right now? Am I in fight, flight, freeze? Or when you touch the blue section, you can think to yourself in your self-reflection, how small, medium, or large are my emotions in my mammal brain? And the green part, what can I do right now to access my CEO so I can solve this problem for the greater good? So this is just a grounder for you. And one of the things that I'm going to encourage you to do is these are the many ways you can stay in touch with us. But if you go to our website and our homepage and you put your email in and you type in the word vaccine, or if I get your emails between March 1st, I'm going to randomly pick 5 winners and I will mail these to you. And if you want a few more than one, I'm happy to get you one for your whole family. So I just can't wait to listen to Damon. My job was to talk about the social emotional aspects of this. And Damon, I really look forward to hearing from you next. Thank you so much, everybody. I will stop. Yep.
Oh, well, thank you, Julie. No pressure at all, but to follow you and our excellent panelists this morning, just tremendous and a wealth of information and really things that we can utilize and help educate other people, our networks, our family members, our community members about the safety of the vaccination and hopefully ease some of the concerns. Thank Ed in Region 9 for the wonderful introduction. As you see on the screen, what it doesn't say is I lead a large Head Start program in San Diego, California that serves over 7,000 families. And we do such a great job. And I'm only a reflection of the 800 team members that really put themselves out there, that are committed to excellence and doing great work each and every day in the San Diego community. I was asked to really share a story, some perceptions, and my perspective as a Black man who was very active on various fronts, whether it's in the ECE world or in other community organizations where I give some of my knowledge and expertise and some of my experiences just to help organizations and people grow. I'll start by saying I am a husband and a father of 2. I have a 21-year-old daughter, a 16-year-old son who have both, been, well, my youngest one is always at home, but my 21-year-old is back home, has been back home since March once the pandemic kind of set in and we started to get stay-at-home orders and things of that nature. So we've all been here, been very respectful of the stay-at-home orders and much like you all have been paying very close attention to the developments of the pandemic as well as the developments of the vaccination. What I can say is, once we started to hear about a vaccination being developed while the pandemic was gaining legs and picking up steam, it created red flags for me and some of my friends, and I'll share a little bit about my friends later. It really stems from a lack of trust. The African American community, I can say emphatically, has a historical distrust of what we've seen, over the last years through the Black Lives Matter movement. There has been trust in, obviously, the law enforcement industry. There has been mistrust in certain levels of the educational institutions that we have in our country, and also of the medical field. I can really remember having discussions with friends and even my parents about the Tuskegee experiment, how that experiment lasted for decades. And it took well over 50 years to get an acknowledgement or an apology to the African American community for the disastrous effects of the Tuskegee experiment. I also remember reading about African Americans decades ago being treated with plutonium. And for those of you that don't know the effects of plutonium, I'm sure our medical advisors can tell you they can be very harmful, can cause death, cancer, and genetic dysfunction. These are things that the African American community has experienced, has witnessed, and often talked about around things that are presented to us, whether it's the flu shot, whether it's a shot for shingles, or whether it's a shot for measles. If there's a level of distrust with law enforcement, if there's a level of distrust with the business community, there's no reason why that level of mistrust wouldn't transcend to the medical community. And so let me fast forward, during the pandemic to last month, December. My wife was actually, my wife tested positive for COVID-19. And like I mentioned earlier, we had all been respectful of the stay-at-home orders, very little number of trips going outside the house. We did everything we could to keep ourselves safe. However, she contracted the virus. Fortunately, neither myself or my children in the same household, neither of us contracted the virus. We were tested 3 or 4 times, and really thankful that didn't happen to us, where the spread didn't just be dispersed throughout my household. At that point in time, I personally, or my family, we experienced a set of emotions that really made us feel very vulnerable, to say the least. Questioned how we could further protect ourselves because we thought we were doing a good job, and really, it reminds you of how precious your family members are, and how how me as a father really wants to protect my family each and every day. So a lot of self-reflection occurred during those moments. Just so happens that my best friend is a professor at the University of Michigan School of Medicine. And we talk often, and rarely do we talk about work, my profession or his. We talk about good times with the family, when will we ever be able to see each other in person again, and just catching up on things to keep it lighthearted and not like work or a struggle. But we started to have conversations about the vaccination. And I would come at him very hard and say, how can we be sure that this vaccination, the speed in which it was produced, is not a political ploy to have our former president become reelected? How do we know that this is safe for the African American community? And my friend Kevin, his name is Kevin Jones, and I'll share a video that he was a part of here in a minute. We started to go down the line of just knocking those barriers down. He shared with me research that many African American doctors were at the center of the development of some of the vaccinations that we see. He talked to me about the decades of technology that have gone into producing vaccinations that we were already somewhat ready for. He really did a great job in really calming my concerns about the long-term effects, where he educated me about side effects from receiving a vaccination generally appear early on after you receive the vaccination. They don't generally appear, months and years down the road, based on his research and his education. He also encouraged me to continue to study and research from sources other than him, sources that I trust, or even some that I don't trust, so I can have both perspectives. It was a very good process for me just to get to the point to where I feel extremely confident in the vaccination, and looking forward to the day when my wife and myself and our children can obtain the vaccination. This video that we have here on the screen, again, Kevin Jones, he's my best friend. Just want to share with you this video on the vaccination and how it can really help us.
For decades, Black Americans
have been mistreated and underrepresented by the medical and scientific communities.
As a result, there's a deep lack of
have been mistreated and underrepresented by the medical and scientific communities.
As a result, there is a deep lack of trust.
But we must and we will do better.
One of the wrongs we can right
is to stop the damage being done by the COVID-19 pandemic.
The disproportionate number of Black lives that this virus has taken.
As a Black surgeon,
a father,
a student, a mother,
and a person with a disability, my message to you is,
do not let our communities miss out
of the full benefit of the COVID-19 vaccine.
The vaccines have met rigorous safety standards set by the FDA.
And they are effective at blocking disease caused by COVID-19.
The COVID-19 vaccines are for every one of us.
Our communities deserve this breakthrough.
You can help save lives.
And make sure our communities benefit
from the protections of these vaccines.
Every shot counts.
I'll just close by saying, as I look at the time, and I know we have Q&A, that video, even though, you know, my best friend's in it, it was really the icing on the cake for me. I think Julie spoke to people that look like me, act like me, talk like me. Kind of validating the vaccination really helps. And really, I hope you guys were able to just pick up a couple of nuggets of knowledge that'll help you in your various programs and your various communities get over the fear and trepidation around receiving the vaccine. And as the last slide shows, every shot counts. So I think we're going to go to Q&A, correct?
Yes, thank you, Damon. Thank you, Dipesh and Julie, for just a great series of slides, information. And as we've shared in the chat, all of this will be coming out to all the attendees in the follow-up emails. On our website, and as you see here, we've also listed some of the key information sources from the Center for Disease Control, as well as the public health authorities. In the month of December, Region 9 did a survey of members. We had about 200 folks follow up, and they told us three things that they needed. First, they needed to have really reliable sources. They didn't want to rely on Facebook or friends. They needed to hear what the CDC was saying. There was a heightened urgency for authentic advisory resources. So one of our messages today is, if you are an individual who has the chance to impact others with information, be sure to cite credible sources from the CDC, from your public health advisors, and so forth. Check your sources. The second piece that folks told us is about 30% of those who responded, about 30% of the respondents are hesitant around receiving the vaccine. And we know from the materials that are rolling out that we need to raise that bar up into the 85, 90% level to hit the herd immunity qualities that we're seeking with vaccination. So we know that a good number of you are hesitant. And so that's part of why this series has been put together, for you to hear about the hesitancy. If you aren't hesitant, but members of your community, your staff, your household are hesitant, to encourage them to think about the science, think about the emotion, and think about the personal journey. And then lastly, members who took the survey ask that they have places to have these conversations, that if agencies and if centers and in sites would have town halls, have meetings to review the details, that would be most helpful. They need to process this. So as an organization that believes in elevating the good work of local agencies, we're really calling on leadership like Damon to convene town hall discussions, bring in your community health experts, bring in reliable sources, and let people explore their hesitancy so that together we can move forward to obtain that quality of life. So before we finish and go to Q&A, and I'm going to ask if folks will stay just a few minutes extra with us. I know, Julie, you have a hard stop, but if we can stay a little longer, we have a quick poll for you. So Fernando will raise the poll, and we're doing this to guide our work, just to get a sense. So go ahead. The poll is, when you're notified it's your turn, are you ready to take your COVID-19 vaccine shot? So we're going to let that run out for a few minutes. Looks like we've got about 60% of you voting, so thank you for taking the moment to do that. And while that's running, why don't we go ahead and go to our Q&A. Let me tell you, we have about 50 questions in the Q&A. We won't get to all of them. I'm going to ask just a couple, and then we'll be sure to sort as many of these we can out on the side and share answers when we have them. So let me just scroll through and see if there are a couple that would make the most sense. Some of them are very county specific as to when do I get my shot. Some others are more general. So Dr. Navsaria, one question is about side effects and the vaccine. Can you share just a little bit about what you've heard about side effects?
Black Americans.
Yeah, side effects. So most of the vast majority of side effects that people experience are what you'd expect after most vaccines. Some arm soreness, some redness, sometimes a little bit of swelling, feeling tired, a bit of a fever, etc. The mRNA vaccines, which are the Pfizer and Moderna ones, people have said often the second one, they seem to feel really zonked the day after, and then they're fine within a day. And the way I would view this is not as a bad thing, but this is your body having an immune response. This is how you know it's working. I personally, that was about what I had from any of, actually, I was convinced that I had the placebo in the trial because I had virtually no response of any kind that I felt. And I was very surprised when they unblinded me in the trial and told me, no, you actually got the vaccine. I'm like, really? Wow, okay. That is the majority of what is being experienced. There are a few cases of allergic reaction that they're trying to kind of figure out here. That is a extremely tiny number of people compared to the many thousands, now millions of doses that have been done there.
Thank you. And you can see our poll results, and that sort of runs with our survey, which is consistent to see that about 61% of you are ready to step up and take your shot. About 16% of you are not ready. We do respect that. About 24% of you are sitting on the fence. So that validates that, you know, right around 40% of you are sitting in a place of question, a place of discovery. So we're here to support that and encourage you to continue on that journey. Let me just go back to our questions. One other that I see here is about pregnancy and receiving the COVID vaccine vaccines. What can you share with us about what we know about that? What's the best response?
Yeah, so the trials deliberately did not include, it did not intentionally include pregnant women because, you know, look, it's really hard to convince someone, oh, you're pregnant. We'd like you to be in this research trial and see what happens, right? Like that's really hard to get anyone to say yes to that. And why would you, right? However, there were a small number of women who did become pregnant during the trial, and they did not find any adverse events in those small number of people. The American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology and the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine to answer the lactation question as well, have both said, if you think about it, contracting COVID and going through childbirth is much higher risk than any small potential risk that there would be of receiving the vaccine while you're pregnant. So they are recommending that it be something that is offered at least and discussed. To date, no one's seen a concern, but if you're looking for this sort of big trial of all of pregnant women versus placebo, that's not going to happen for a long amount of time. So that's the current guidance. ACOG, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, has a very good statement out on this. They've thought about this really deeply.
Great. We'll certainly pull that up and share that resource as well. Julie, one other question that we'll go to, and that is dealing with individuals who are refusing it. How do you manage not shaming them?
Yes. You're never going to change someone's brain by telling them what to do or shaming them or criticizing them. Everybody has to make their own unique decision that makes them feel safe and comfortable. That's the most important thing. So we need to honor the decisions that others make. We need to trust that they're going to make decisions. One of the things we can do is in helping them, if they're open, is giving them factual resources and information and helping them talk about it. The research shows the more I can talk about my fears, the more I can calm my activated stress response system. So by being there as a neutral person, holding a safe space for them to talk, as they talk and let off some of that steam of the fears they have, they might be able to access more of their logic brain. So those are the pieces of advice that I would offer.
Thank you, Julie. And Damon, let me just close with you. And one question that has come up, not on this call, but in other calls, and that is about mandating the vaccine for Head Start employees. Can you share what your leadership team is thinking around how you navigate going forward as the vaccine becomes more available for our staff?
Yes, I can. We've been researching kind of globally companies around the world that are requiring their employees to obtain the vaccination. What we found in our research, only about 5% of the companies worldwide are requiring their employees to do so. And so we're right now, we're taking a wait and see approach before we step into the realm of either enforcing a mandate, because I think it's important for obviously the legal system to weigh in on this. I think it's important for medical professionals to continue to weigh in on this. And it doesn't just really begin and end with having our staff vaccinated. We have to think about the children and the clients that we serve as well. Right now, we're just trying to embrace the educational standpoint of it and really educate our employees to make an informed decision and provide them with as much information as they need. And we're going to let the regulatory folks do what they do to offer guidance in terms of whether it be a required vaccination to attend school, like we see with some of the other vaccinations in California.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Damon. Thank you, Julie, for your words of wisdom, and Dr. Navsaria, thank you as well for joining us from cold Wisconsin. I have to say, I really appreciated the plug for the cheese industry. I suppose we'll have to come up with one for Californians, but maybe the technology that we're using is a good plug for California as well. So thanks to everyone who was with us today. Again, as you see, we'll be repeating this effort on vaccine education on the 24th of February and on March 31st. Thank you to Continued.com for their ongoing partnership with adult education with online learning. And of course, to my partner in Michigan, Robin Bozick with the Michigan Head Start Association. In about 48 hours, you will receive an email from us with the slides, with access to the recording. Be sure to follow up if you have any questions. And if you have particular resources that are working in your community, share those out as well, because both Michigan Head Start and Region 9 are actively gathering, listing, and sharing out resources for this community. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and thanks again for being with us.